Today, we're going to dig into a personal history, a story that was almost completely forgotten. It all revolves around one man, Giuseppe Agostini. He was just a boy when he left his tiny Italian hometown of Tiglio, and he had no idea he was starting a brand new family line on the other side of a continent. So let me ask you a question. How much do you really know about your family tree? I mean, sure, we might know our grandparents, but what about the people before them? Their stories, their struggles, their incredible journeys. So much of that just gets lost to time, doesn't it?
And this story, it starts in that exact place. The person who researched all of this said his grandfathers were already old when he was born, and, well, their stories just kind of went with them. The past was pretty much a closed book.
But then, one day, everything changed. A casual chat with his grandfather and an almost throwaway comment comes out. There was Italian blood in the family. Just like that. That one sentence kicked off a massive journey into the past, a mission to find out the truth.
You know, this wasn't just some neat little trivia fact. This was a completely unknown part of the family's identity, a secret that had been hiding in plain sight for generations. So, digging through old records, our researcher finds his great-grandmother's maiden name, Agastina. That's a pretty unusual name, right? It was the very first thread he could pull on to try and unravel this thing. But as it turned out, Agastina was only the beginning of the puzzle.
And this is where the real detective work kicks in. Because trying to uncover a story from the 1800s, it's a full-on mission. You're at the mercy of handwritten records, terrible spelling, and just the general chaos of history. And that chaos showed up almost immediately. The name Augustina just wasn't consistent. You look at a marriage certificate, then a census, then a baptismal record, and the spelling shifts and changes every time. It became pretty obvious that this couldn't be the original name.
And this table here, it just lays out the problem so clearly. The original Italian name, Giuseppe Agostini, gets anglicized to Joseph. Okay, that makes sense. But then the surname goes haywire. Agostini becomes Agostina, or sometimes even Agestina. This was super common for immigrants. You had English-speaking clerks just writing down what they thought they heard.
But beyond his name, another story started to pop out from the records, and this one was about his work. His job was anything but stable, and the changes, well, they hint at a life of real struggle in his new home. I mean, this timeline of his career, it tells a tough story. In 1854, on his marriage certificate, he's listed as a plasterer. That's a skilled trade. But by the 1861 census, he's a laborer at cement works. Later records list him as both. This wasn't a career ladder. This was a slide down into hard manual labor. This document right here, this is the anchor for the entire family story in England. It's the certificate for his marriage to a widow named Maria Cole. And there he is, recorded as Joseph Agastina, a plasterer, with his father listed as Angelo. This single piece of paper is the bedrock of the entire investigation. Now, to really understand Giuseppe's story, we have to understand where he came from. See, he wasn't just any immigrant. He was part of a very specific community of craftsmen with a unique skill and culture. They were known as the figuristi. So what exactly is a figurista? Well, the term refers to these artisans, mostly from the Lucca province in Tuscany, and what they did was specialize in making and selling these plaster figures. You know, little statues, busts, decorative things. It was a skilled artistic trade passed down for generations. So why did they leave home? It really just came down to survival. While their towns had this proud history of craftsmanship, there just wasn't a big enough market in rural Tuscany to support them all. So to make a living, they had to take their art on the road to the big cities of Europe, selling to a growing tourist market. And their journey was unbelievably difficult. I mean, this was not a simple trip. They would leave their homes, walk across the Alps, then trek the entire length of France, and finally get on a boat at a port like Calais to cross the English Channel. When they arrived in Dover, they had to show their passports and were registered as alien arrivals. And here's a detail from the records that just blows me away. When Giuseppe Agostini first arrived in Dover, he was only 16 years old, and his younger brother, Agostino, was with him. He was just 13. I mean, they were just boys, setting off on this life-changing journey. So, you've got this 16-year-old kid arriving in England. He has a skilled trade, he has hope for a better life, but the reality of industrial London, well, that was something else entirely. He arrived as a trained craftsman, a figurista, part of this respected tradition of artists. But in London, that whole identity just eroded away. He became a common laborer in the cement works of Millwall, a back-breaking job that probably destroyed his health. The dream had met a very, very harsh reality.
His life in England can really be summed up by these key moments. You've got the hope of his marriage in 1854, the harsh reality of his life as a laborer in 1861, and then his tragic early death in 1872. He died of phthisis, which was the common name for tuberculosis back then, at just 47 years old, leaving behind a wife and children.
But his death wasn't the end of the story, not for his family or for his community. Just 4 years later, his widow, Maria, married a man named Carlo Notini. And he wasn't just any man. He was another Italian plaster molder. It really shows you just how interconnected these immigrant families were, how they had to support each other so far from home. So, what is the legacy of this boy from Tiglio? His journey didn't just end with his death in 1872. It created ripples that are still being felt right now, today.
The author wraps up their research with this thought. Even though Giuseppe's time as a British subject was actually a pretty short part of his life, being able to find these little fragments is just such a powerful act. It's like giving a voice back to someone who was almost completely lost to history. And so Giuseppe's legacy lives on in some pretty fascinating ways. That corrupted name that he accidentally brought into the family, Agastina, it's still around. The Notini family, who became linked to his by marriage, they later changed their name to Norris to avoid anti-Italian feelings during World War II. And most importantly, Giuseppe was part of a pioneering group who brought a piece of Italian culture to London long before the major waves of immigration.
And really, that brings us right back to the beginning. Giuseppe's story was nearly forgotten, hidden behind a changed name and just the silence of generations. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What secrets, what journeys, what incredible stories are just waiting there in your family's history, waiting for someone to start digging?